Hey guys, welcome to the Social Exchange Drams from Afar. Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone's keeping well, staying sane, etc, etc. Haven't done too many puzzles. Just before I start, big shout out to a couple of our mates, Haynes & Co and Crybaby are both selling booze online now. So if you guys are stuck at home, need something delivered, then by all means jump on their websites. Crybaby are doing live whiskey masterclasses, I believe. Sorry, that was Haynes, and Crybaby are doing cocktail kits. So yeah, jump on, support local, and hopefully we'll all come out the other side feeling okay. Awesome. So tonight we're going to be talking about rye whiskey, Knob Creek Rye, to be precise, and I'm going to talk you through the Sazerac, which is a pretty cool cocktail. But what we might do first up is just have a bit of a chat about this particular product. So I've spoken to you guys heaps so far about bourbon, and I had a little chat last night about one of my favourite Scotch whiskies, but we haven't said anything much about rye. So, rye whiskey, what is it? Well, basically it follows most of the same rules as bourbon, with the exception that instead of like a bourbon being a minimum 51% corn, rye whiskey is a minimum 51% rye, and then the rest of its grains are made up of malted barley and corn. So what does rye give us as a grain? It's easiest if you think of rye bread, and it's kind of spicy and peppery. It gives us those kind of flavors, but it also changes the nature of the sweetness, okay? So it's still aged in new charred barrels as bourbon is, but instead of getting these sort of caramelly sweetnesses, we're getting these brighter white sweetnesses, so more like your white sugar or your boiled lollies, that kind of thing. So let's just have a little taste. Yeah, see exactly what I'm saying. So you've got your baking spices coming through, you've got peppery notes from that rye, but you've also got some really nice light sweetness going on there. And because it's still in American oak, then we're still getting those kinds of vanilla flavors that you would expect. So Knob Creek Rye is a fairly new addition to the Jim Beam Small Batch collection. So we all spoke a couple of times over the previous weeks about the Jim Beam Small Batch collection. It was launched in 1992 by Booker No, and comprises, or the first round anyway, was Booker's, Baker's, Basil Hayden's and Knob Creek. So this one is a new addition, the Knob Creek Rye, or newer. It is named after Knob Creek, which is a pretty famous creek that runs just at the base of the distillery and also ran through the backyard of Abraham Lincoln's childhood home. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. Again, with the original Knob Creek, if you look at this label, it's an upside down newspaper with a bit of a nod to sort of prohibition and having to wrap your booze up in newspaper so the cops didn't see it, etc, etc. Cool. It's bottled at 50% ABV, so it's quite high. Which makes it perfect for these sort of classic American cocktails that we're going to start exploring. Beautiful. Okie doke. I'm going to talk to you about the Sazerac. Now, the Sazerac was introduced in New Orleans, and I wanted to give you a bit of a backstory on New Orleans, because New Orleans was like vital to the birth of American whiskey, bourbon and rye whiskey. Okay, so I'll set just a little bit of a scene for you. From the 1760s through to 1800, Spain had control of Louisiana, and then in 1800, then France took control of it, okay? And at this point, then Thomas Jefferson, who was president of the US at the time, sort of stuck his head up and went, hang on a minute, New Orleans, Louisiana, and particularly New Orleans, are really, really important to us. It was the major shipping town, right? It was the route to the rest of the world. And as long as that was under either Spanish or French control, then the new Americans couldn't sort of guarantee either safe passage to New Orleans or being able to ship out their products once they got there. And America was just sort of, it was just being born. It was just starting to get on its feet. So Thomas Jefferson kind of contemplated all of this and saw how important, how integral New Orleans actually was to the birth of America. So in 1803, Jefferson's government started negotiating with the French, and they ended up purchasing the Louisiana territory for $15 million. Cool. So that sounds like a lot of money back then, but it wasn't just Louisiana that they bought. They called it the Louisiana Territory, right? But actually what it was sort of all of New England, right? So if you move a bit further west, then you've got west of the Mississippi and all the way up to the Canadian border. So all along the Canadian border, then back down through all of those cowboy countries, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, all down through the Rockies, and all the way back down to Louisiana. So it effectively, the purchase of the Louisiana Territory doubled the size of America at that point in time. So this all happened in 1803, so crazy, right? But at that point, then both bourbon and rye whiskey was able to easily get down all the waterways, get to Louisiana, get to New Orleans, and then be shipped out overseas. So it was super, super important, the Louisiana Purchase. So then 1850, okay, this is Louisiana, New Orleans has been amping up the party for a while. There's a lot of American whiskey floating around. And in 1850, this little coffee house popped up. And it had just started importing this French cognac called, what was it, Sazerac de Forge et Fille. Okay? It had just started importing it, and it started playing with this cognac, and it came up with a drink that involved some bitters and some absinthe. And so it called the drink the Sazerac and went, well, bugger it, we'll call ourselves the Sazerac Coffee House. Okay? So that was the beginning of the Sazerac. And then at that point, because there was so much American whiskey everywhere, it was a logical step to say, how about we try it with some rye whiskey instead of cognac? These days, if you go to New Orleans, the default Sazerac is made with rye whiskey. So there's a little bit of history for you. Why don't we go ahead and make this drink? It is, so I'm going to make this in a kind of traditional way. I am, first of all, going to ice down my glass, all right? And then I'm going to mix it in just an old-fashioned glass, which might seem a little bit weird to you, but this was the way that they actually made the Sazerac, and they still do make the Sazerac, not in a proper mixing glass, but just in one of these. So we're just going to put a bar spoon, okay, of sugar syrup in there, or 5-7 mils, something along those lines. Now traditionally you do use a sugar cube. I just don't use sugar cubes. They take too long to break down, and they date back to an era before we had ice, and so everything was a lot warmer. So it just makes a lot more sense to me to use sugar syrup. And then I've got Peychaud's bitters. I'm going to put 4 dashes in. Okay, it's a lot. Now, why Peychaud's? Peychaud's was the bitters used at the time. So if you don't have Peychaud's, but you have Angostura or you have Australian bitters, use that. You don't need to rush out and buy a different sort of bitters. But that was the original bitters used at the time, and it's got all of these sort of cherry notes going through it, which really do kind of lift that whole drink up. Cool. Now I'm going to put a double shot of rye whiskey in this drink. Okay. Just like that. And before I ice that down, I'm going to just get a lemon and a peeler, and we'll just peel ourselves a piece of lemon for our garnish, like so. Okay, then I'm going to fill my glass with ice. There we go. Just going to give it a little stir. So you guys might actually recognize this recipe. It's basically a rye old-fashioned, okay? Made with Peychaud's bitters, sure, but it's basically a rye old-fashioned. This kind of harks back to my point about once you know one recipe, you often know lots of recipes. I'm just going to chuck this over the side. Again, don't worry, there's nothing down there.
Ow. Oh.
Lots of saying, ow. No, you're over there. Okay, and this is what makes this drink kind of special and different from an old-fashioned. I've just put a tiny little bit of absinthe in there. Can you all see that? Yeah. And I'm just going to make sure that that absinthe is rolled all the way around that glass. So it's going to stick to the sides. I'm just going to let the rest of that sit in there. A lot of people will throw that out. I just don't think that's necessary. Especially in these times, don't waste, right? Okay, and then I'm going to strain my Sazerac into my little coupe glass. I'm serving it in a little coupe, but you don't have to. You can serve it in anything. And if you want to serve it over ice, you can. I won't judge. Cool. Then I'm going to take my little bit of lemon peel and I'm going to squeeze it. So you may not have been able to see that, but a whole lot of essential oils just came out of that peel. I'll wipe it around, give it a little, and that is a Sazerac. I'm gonna have a little taste. I'm just looking desperate to taste it. Oh yeah, it's got kick. It's beautiful actually. It's really nicely balanced. There you go, babe. While you're drinking that, any questions? No? We're all pretty good? Look, I hope everyone's staying safe. If anyone has any drinks that they'd like to see me make or anything they'd specifically like me to discuss, just flick me a quick message or or just pop something in these comments and we'll do our best to oblige. Cool. Well, thanks Mods for helping out with the camera work as always. Now our dog's finally stopped barking.
Chad,
sorry about that.
Chad thinks it looks tasty. Which, the drink or my wife? Clarify yourself, Chad.
Clarify yourself, Chad. Alright, well thanks guys. Have a great Wednesday. Oh, before I forget, we're still running the isolation impersonation contest. So, if you haven't done this already, do your Sean Connery impersonation. Put at the Exchange Oz, AUS, THEEXCHANGEAUS, and tag me in it. Yes, it's written there, the Exchange. Tag me in it, and you could be in the running to win $200 worth of takeaway or delivery restaurant vouchers to the restaurant of your choice.
What, Peter Hillhorse, what's the difference between chartreuse and absinthe?
What's the difference between chartreuse and absinthe?
Absinthe makes the heart grow fonder.
Absinthe makes the heart grow fonder. Look, chartreuse is a herbal liqueur, but absinthe contains more wormwood. It's just a different recipe. They are quite similar sort of things though. So if you don't have any absinthe at home, you can sometimes use green chartreuse instead. Okay.
Mark Gerber wants to you to show people how to make a proper martini.
Okay, we can do that. We might have a crack at it next week. Thanks,
and Chris Britton
yes.
says it's not sure if it's a small coupe or a large Mods.
Column A, column B is the answer to that. He's got big hands. Okay, guys. I will sign off this time. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're all staying safe. And
see you when you've got nothing on.
See you next week. Bye.